And now, join us for live streaming from Tel Aviv Yafo.
Hello and welcome to this evening's event. Wherever you are, it may not be evening, afternoon, morning, middle of the night, whatever it is, we're very, very happy to have you with us here at Israel Drama 2021. My name is James Int'l. I'm a writer and a journalist and critic and like all of us, wear many hats. This is a serious subject that we're tackling today, and theatre, as much as anything, is here to tackle serious subjects. And I hope it's not going to be too intense, but we shouldn't shirk those things either. We're here to talk about, the title of today's session is Ability Beyond Disability. It's a focus on trauma, something that many of us have been all too familiar with over the last 2 years, especially. And here in Israel, we have, unfortunately, a long-standing association because of the various situations that surround us here. We also have, unfortunately, a solemn duty today, unforeseen, because it pains me to say that the playwright of one of the wonderful plays we're considering today, called Kaban, Nevo Ziv, tragically passed away just over a week ago. Nevo Ziv was an important playwright, an important journalist as well for Yediot Ahronot, which is one of the best-selling Israeli newspapers, and his absence is very much felt already here in Israel. But we will try to pay tribute to him through his wonderful play Kaban, which we will discuss today, and through his great guiding spirit. We will be talking today to his wife, Daphne Zilberg, who worked with him and directed his plays, and we would like to dedicate today's session to him. So let's start with a video clip from this tremendous, really tremendous play, Kaban. I don't mind admitting I was in tears at the end of it, but it's also a very riveting piece of work. Kaban is the psychotherapist officers that they have in the army. The story is about a psychotherapist who's now no longer in the army, and he sees a private client who he thinks is completely a stranger, and it turns out that he's met this guy before, and the man pulls a knife and quizzes him about a soldier who he has treated who has died. The whole story is trying to get to the bottom of how this soldier died and whether this psychoanalyst is responsible in any way, whether the other soldier is responsible in any way. It's like a puzzle, a mystery, as is, of course, the brain itself. So the clip we're going to see here is when the soldier, Benny, has been discharged from fighting in Gaza. This play, by the way, is based on real events that happened in 2014 in the fighting that happened in Gaza then. And he's arguing with the mother of Benny that he says Benny has to go back to the army and she can think of nothing worse.
הוא אכזב את החברים שלו, סיכן את החיים שלהם. תחשבי איך את היית מרגישה במקומו.
לא, אתה לא שפוי. זה משוגע לגמרי. אתה לא לוקח אותו לשום מקום, איפה הטלפון? דורון יהרוג אותך, אתה לא לוקח אותו לשום מקום. הוא ידבר עם האלוף, עם כל הצמא, אתה הולך מפה לכלא.
שרה, חכי רגע.
תתרחק ממני.
קשה להבין את זה, אבל זה הדבר היחיד שיכול להחזיר לך את הילד שלך.
הילד שלי פה בחדר.
להחזיר לך אותו באמת, לא צל של עצמו.
אני אטפל בו.
הוא לא רוצה שתטפלי בו. הוא לא תינוק. הוא לוחם. לפני שבוע הוא צד מחבלים בעזה. הוא צריך את התמיכה שלך.
אתה מבקש ממני לעודד אותו לחזור לשם?
את אימא שלו.
זה לשלוח אותו למות שם.
זה לשלוח אותו כמו כל לוחם אחר.
אבל הוא לא כמו כל לוחם אחר. הוא פצוע, הילד שלי פצוע.
שרה, אני נשבע לך, אם זה היה הילד שלי, הייתי עושה את אותו דבר. מגנה עליו באומץ. ובאותו האומץ, את צריכה לתמוך בהחלטה שלו.
אבל הוא בבית. במיטה שלו, בידיים שלי, אני יכולה לחבק אותו, לנשק אותו בצבא, הוא ילד רגיש, הוא יתפרק. לא, אני לא אתן לך. לא אתן לך שתיקח אותו, אל תיקח אותו. אל תיקח אותו, תבקש ממנו שיוריד את המדים. תגיד לו שאתם לא נוסעים. אתם לא נוסעים עכשיו. לא, אתה תלך מפה. אתה תלך, מלאך המוות, אתה תלך מפה.
שרה, זה מה שבני רוצה.
לא, אבל אני לא רוצה.
זה מה שבני רוצה.
אני לא רוצה, אני לא מסכימה, לא. לא, אם הוא הולך לשם, הוא לא חוזר את הנופי. אני אמא שלו, אני מרגישה את זה, אני יודעת. הוא לא יחזור משם.
רק אם הוא יחזור לשם, הוא יחזור לעצמו.
Really a tremendous piece of work. That's from the Habima National Theatre of Israel. And we have on the line now Daphne Silberg, the director of the play, and she was, of course, the wife of Nevo Ziv, who we remember today. Daphne, are you there?
Yes, hi.
Hi, I'm sorry again for such sad circumstances, but this is such a powerful and moving piece of work.
Thank you.
So let me ask you, if I may, a little bit about how the play came about. I understand it's based on real events.
Yes. So first I have to say it's quite difficult for me to be here today, but I felt that there's something symbolic in this, that Nevo's play continues to resonate after his death. So Nevo started to write the play. He was a journalist in Yediot Achronot, and he worked on this big article where he interviewed MHOs, mental health officers in the IDF. And he was fascinated by the subject, and especially by this specific technique of therapy that was quite innovative, that they treat the mentally hurt soldier, and they quickly try to get him back to his team and to the battlefield in order to reduce the PTSD. And he was very curious, and he continued to meet two of these MHOs. He didn't know where is it how is it going to develop. And we had some brainstorming at home after a few meetings that we met them, and we understood that it's going to be a play. And then Nevo started writing and developing this idea into a full play with Moshe Captain, the artistic director of Habima, and Shachar Pinkas, the dramaturg, that really walked with us all the way to the full play. And about the disability, I think maybe I will try to say Nevo's point of view to it, and also myself. It's a bit hard for me to speak for Nevo, but I think his story and his connection to it is that he was always the super sensitive boy in a quite rough neighborhood, and he tried to hide his sensitivity. And I think that the minute he understood his sensitivity is his superpower, he started to flourish. And when he understood that this is what makes him the great interviewer, and this is what gives him the ability to tell stories. And I think that's where he found his true power. And from my point of view, I think, I have a very strong personal connection with the mental health issues. I had a younger brother that committed suicide 8 years ago after struggling with mental illness for a few years. And I had the strong feeling I had from this very sad story is that we were full of shame hovering over us. I mean, not only the struggle with the disease, but we felt ashamed. And I remember myself wishing he had a physical illness and not a mental illness, and maybe then it would be easier. And this is the place that I identified with these mentally hurt soldiers. And I think that if telling this story on stage can help even one soldier to feel less ashamed, then this is the victory. And I saw these post-traumatic soldiers in the audience, and they approached us after the show, and listening to them say that they saw themselves on stage, and that it was accurate and it wasn't a stereotype, and that they truly found their post-trauma on stage and their voice on stage, it felt very satisfying.
Well, that's very moving to hear. I was actually talking to a psychotherapist friend of mine here in Israel the other day, and he said that coming out of Corona, I hope we're coming out of Corona, there is an epidemic of psychological problems that the industry has never seen in living memory. And yes. I suspect, if I may say, that this play will help not just soldiers, but a lot of people who are struggling with that. But I wanted to ask you also, there's something very interesting here about the stage language, if I can ask you about this, as the director now. Because when I started watching it, it struck me that it was a little bit like the sort of classical structure that we know from classical theatre, Greek theatre and so on, where things, you don't see things, but they're reported on. And of course, a lot of psychotherapy is that. You talk about what may have happened, you try and get to what may have happened without, the doctor, of course, having actually experienced it himself. But then as the play goes on, it becomes much more physical. In the segment that we just saw, it was quite physical. There was pushing and there was pulling. And as the play moves towards its climax, it feels like the very active, traumatic occurrences that are being talked about are starting to come into the rooms where the therapy is being discussed. So I'm curious to know whether that was deliberate, whether it actually felt therapeutic when you and Neva were creating that with the actors as well.
Okay, so first there is this the story of the frame where the therapist and the post-traumatic soldier meet, and they tell the story. And it was very important for us, the power of telling your story, of owning your story, and it was obvious to us from the beginning that telling the story will cure the therapist and the post-traumatic soldier. I mean, they both need it. They both wish for it, and like in the Greek plays, I mean, we didn't want to show the horrors because they are in your head, and this is part of the difficulty. There are flashbacks in video, but they are really flashes, and they are fragments, like the trauma itself. You can't really go back to the crime scene, but you can retell the story over and over again, and maybe the flashes will become this one clear line. And of course, as we go to the end, we can reach closer to at least to the memory, and the final. I mean, 2 scenes before the end, it's the scene where they come back in their minds to the place that scarred them, all of them.
And tremendous performances from all the actors as well. And
thank you.
And the play feels very organic. It almost I think this is what I'm trying to get to. It feels like the kind of process one would have with a psychotherapist. It feels like the rehearsal process for all of you was a journey getting towards something. Is that true?
Yes, it was, and I think I was never in a rehearsal room with so many male actors crying throughout the process. I think it was so, there was a lot of freedom in it. And we had a simulation during the rehearsals with one of the HMOs that Nevo interviewed. He was in the rehearsal room, and he made a simulation of a therapy. And we were amazed because this improvisation that he did with one of the actors was almost identical to the play.
Wow.
And it was a very strong moment. I think after this session, everything became deeper emotionally in the rehearsal room.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's very interesting to hear you did improvisations as well, because the play feels a bit like there's a mystery element to it as well. It feels a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, and that we're seeing things from lots of different perspectives, fragments from lots of different points of view. So I wondered if you came to that through improvisation, or whether it was Nevo's journalistic background, because, and as a journalist myself, I know putting together a story is finding these fragments, which is people's testimonies and bits of information you can find out.
So I have to say, Nevo did it before the improvisation, and the improvisation only proved me that he was so thorough and that he really assembled everything he investigated. It was more helpful for the actors and for me, but to deepen the work, but the words were already there.
Wonderful. Well, Daphne, we appreciate you being here so much today. Our hearts go out to you, but I really mean this. This is a tremendous piece of work, and I really feel it will help a lot of people around the world at a time when that help is particularly needed. So to all of our viewers, all our theatre makers in many countries around the world watching this, as I commend you all the plays this afternoon, this one really is worth your time. And we hope to meet under happier circumstances, but again, really appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
We're going to move now to our second play we're going to consider. This is very different in that Kaban is a somewhat naturalistic play. This play is called Silence Makes Perfect, and it's not naturalistic at all. It's by Yael Razuli and Amit Dolberg. Yael is a very well-known physical theatre maker, and she employs fascinating techniques of puppetry and all different kinds of techniques to come at a very difficult story about child abuse, essentially. And Amit Dolberg, who is the head of the Meitar Chamber Music Ensemble, who interestingly I had known of his work in the kind of straightforward classical music world. He does very similar things musically when you have the two performers on stage. This is a difficult piece of work, as it should be given the subject matter, but incredibly impactful. We're going to watch a segment of this now.
It was only when her feet grew tired that she stopped and realized she was lost. Oh, I'll just rest a little while here, she thought to herself. Just a little while. It was then that she noticed there was a man standing there. Grayish hair, golden glasses, a wide smile. What instrument have you got there, young lady? May I see it? He said, in the softest voice. The child, being well educated, knew never to talk to strangers. But luckily, she recognized him. He had been to their home many times. A friend of the family, one might say. And so, as seemed expected, she opened her case and showed him. Beautiful, he said, with the softest hands. And now, Would you like to play something for me? But the child was shy. Go on. One little song. You want to, I know, and it will be our little secret. She stared into his blue, blue eyes. Such good and loving eyes, she thought to herself. And so the child happily agreed.
Well, we have Yael Razuli on the line with us, the maker of Silence Makes Perfect. I think you're in Bilbao, aren't you? Oh, we can't hear you.
Just arrived last night.
Yeah, sorry, go on. We can
Very
hear you.
exciting to be here. I'm here performing a completely other piece, another performance, more of a romantic comedy that I've been touring many years around the world with. So I'm very honored and thrilled to be on this panel, and I'm very moved by the previous talk with Daphne.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to start with the same kind of very basic but interesting question. How did the idea of this piece evolve? How did the story of it come to you?
Well, first of all, as you said, this is the interview is here with me, but this is a creation made together with Amit Dolberg, and it has quite. I mean, the backstory is, as backstories are often unbelievable, and yet true. With this specific performance, it actually. Its life began long ago when I was a student still at the School of Visual Theatre in Jerusalem, and it was the first puppetry performance that I toured with, was called How Lovely, and it was a 20-minute performance, and it was this story of the child and her cello case. So kinds of in the lines of what you saw, only that so this was a show that I actually created in 2006, and then for many years, I toured it for 13 years, and for many years, it was just the story of a child. It was a solo show. I was telling the story with voiceover and the puppets that come later, just me and the chair and the puppets and the objects. And after touring it for many years, and it was such a powerful performance for the audience, both shocking and important and painful, and I'd have people writing to me and talking to me after shows for many years. But I always felt I don't know exactly the word, but I felt something wasn't right, because I was leaving the audiences with the circle of trauma and. With the circle of violence that was continuing, actually. So, this story was like a little peek into this kind of Little Red Riding Hood story of this child that goes on her way to her music lesson, is abused, and then comes back home and is not heard, and this continues. And actually, that was basically the show, the violence, the attack, and the silencing around it. And and then with the years of performing it, and with life, and with who I became and everything, I felt like no, now it's time to tell this story, but to tell the continuation of it, to tell the second part, which is the woman that this child becomes, and the effects of this violence, the post-trauma, and living with it, and the echoes of it, and maybe. Possibly, hopefully, getting also to talk about the emergence from that, and finding and reclaiming your voice, and of course to put this in the light and to say it, and then I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, then I don't want to do it as a solo anymore. I want to do it as a duo, and I want to do it with the most incredible classic musician I can maybe try to find. I don't have to tell you that although there's a lot in common between the theater and the physical visual theater world and the classical or the contemporary classical music scene, it still is a very different profession.
Yeah, but if I can interrupt, what's interesting there is it struck me when I'm watching this. You really, both of you, pick up on what those two forms have in common, because of course, if you're listening to something like you use, there's some Beethoven in there. There's a Purcell song from Dido and Aeneas, which is the opera Dido and Aeneas, which is actually on the face of it's a very simple tune, and but it kind of really pulls you in. It's very hypnotic, and you feel that there's a lot going on within it. So within very simple notes, there are infinite amounts of sadness and pain. And it seems to me, and I wonder if this was something you did on, I was going to say on purpose, but something you did very consciously, that you did something similar in the visual vocabulary that you developed, that you use lighting and even the setting of the stories. You said like a Red Riding Hood story, and this sing-song narrator's voice, which suggests that you're watching really almost a fairy tale, like a story a grandmother might tell to her grandchild to send them off to sleep. But there's kind of a similar thing going on there, that you have, that there are very deep depths. It's like, what is it? Shakespeare says the end of the Tempest, fathoms deep, no, deeper than did ever plummet sound. It's so deep what's going on within these things that seem very simple. Was this something that consciously you both kind of dived into?
Well, we always, and I can speak for my work also, I always, all the elements have to move together at the same time, whether it is, and everything, so, the design and the sound work and the lighting and the mask work and the performance and the writing, it all has to advance together, which can be also very frustrating and tricky to do, and in collaboration with others. But it's the only way in this kind of work. And I was lucky enough to find a partner that, well, first of all, Amit, when I came to him and I asked him, well, do you want to make the second part of this trilogy? It's actually part of my trilogy on violence against women and rape culture and violence against women and children. And Amit immediately said yes. So first of all, it was amazing to find a partner that would come with me on this road in this very difficult story that's also, I should say loosely, but not so loose. Well, it's inspired, by my own story, and yes, and to find collaborators, to find Ran Kopile, who created those incredible masks, and to find this team, because it was not possible for me to do it alone, or I didn't want to do it alone, and at the same time, wow, it's been quite a journey. Yeah. On this performance, as you can imagine. I'm very happy and proud that we made it, because we started off, with, the last 2 years considering, and we just managed to have the premiere in France, in Charleville, in September, at the International Puppetry Festival there. And I feel like to answer what you talked about the language itself, I think that we used all the elements at our disposal, some of them being like distancing, putting it in a kind of fairy tale place. All the object work and puppetry work is also meant, and the musical work, it's all music and choreography, but it's all meant to give the person who is watching this performance, we're treating such a painful subject, but with like the utmost sensitivity and also, with painful beauty, but with beauty and with very strong imagery that also leaves a lot of place for imagination, I think, and for someone's own way of seeing things.
It's kind of
and it's definitely helped me and us create it, sometimes using all these methods and techniques.
Yeah, I was going to ask, it's kind of, well, two questions in one, I suppose. It's kind of a language of euphemism, it seems to me, that you use here, both visually and in the script. You have the cello case becomes, a euphemism for, well, at one point, the cello case becomes her parents, another point it becomes the abuser, and and all sorts of things on the face of it seem to be one thing and actually represent something else. And I wonder first of all that if by tackling things through hinting and pushing towards a certain direction of the terrible truth, and it is a very upsetting. I found it a very upsetting but important and necessary piece. It's like having to confront something deep in ourselves as a society. I wondered that whether by doing that you felt it would have more impact or maybe be more personal to people than being extremely graphic and extremely literal. And then the second part of my question is whether as a performer it makes it somehow easier for you to perform to go through that ordeal. Maybe it becomes, this might sound simplistic and maybe it's a terrible ordeal to perform every time you do it, but whether it's something less of an ordeal for you because you're doing it in this euphemistic, symbolic kind of way.
Yes, very good questions. Yes, to answer your first question, then absolutely. I think there are moments in the show that are overwhelming, but even when they are overwhelming, still, there is so much. There's so many elements. It's poetic and it's symbolic, and there is the imaginative element of it. And so, yes, I think, for me, I think the most important thing for me, like to say in this show, if I really had to think about that, would be to people who will be watching this show, who are survivors or who are friends or family members of survivors, and that we all are actually. And because it's a massive well, I think it's a huge pandemic in our society. Violence against women and children and sexual violence and all the shame around that and things that people live with at such high numbers. People say 1 out of 5 or 6 women has been raped, 1 out of 5 or 6 children are sexually abused. These are incredible numbers. So, I always think about that and I take that into consideration about people sitting there and first of all, I hope that they feel like they are not alone. That there is someone who sees them and sees this, not only that moment of violence that is talked about, but also the price that sometimes there are no words for it. The fear you live with, or the panic, or the lack of, or the fear of trusting, and the nightmarish and the physical results also of this, and what it does to your soul. And I hope also that from that darkness can emerge a light. And I think that the first step into this light is to break that silence and to put it on stage. So I think there's a lot of power in that for audience members. And this is the feedback that I get, to see someone. And I imagine that most people watching this at least consider the possibility that it might be in some way a true story with many changes. I have to say, with many changes. But that there is a life after, and that there has to be a recognition, and that we have to put this as much as possible into the open and talk about it in every possible way, and also through art, and also through theater and music So when Daphne was talking about that importance of the audience feedback and what people say. I think that's a huge thing. And usually after this performance, we have an audience. We have a talk with the audience. It's very important for us, kind of also to kind of come down together from this experience. We show the masks. We talk about the process. They're all 3D printed, and we talk about the music and the elements. And Amit also shares how it was for him to, jump into this subject, but also into this universe of creation and into the great unknown that is, making theater and this kind of work. And I get a lot of letters, and I have a lot of times, a long line of people that I wait to listen to hold, to hug. just to be there when they're crying or to hear them thank us. I think that's very, very important.
I think that
sometimes I think I'm doing the show just in order to have that moment with the audience, so that they know, they're not alone, and that, I see, I know, and to come all together. I mean, after the 2 years that we've all just had, so clear that importance for us also to come together in the same space and go on a journey like that. And I do really hope that at the end of it there is light. And to answer your question, the first chapter of this performance and this creation, Silence Makes Perfect, is a very big gift in my life. And performing it, I have to admit, is a great pleasure. It's really, David Grossman, the great Israeli author, said, I hope to say correctly, that creating from such a trauma is a way of not being a victim. And I think for people who have experienced and have been in that place, we know what that means, like to be able to not be a victim, because no one wants to be summed up and categorized by the worst thing that's ever happened to them, of course. But if we can transform that together into something else, that's something that gives me a lot of courage. And there have been many things that have happened on the way of creating this, including, unfortunately, another sexual assault that happened to me while I was on the job performing 5 years ago. That it seemed, because I started creating this show in 2016, and I actually had to stop working on it because I found myself reliving with the show I was writing, and also being I spoke out about that, and I was also silenced. And so the fact that I could have my voice through my artwork, I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that it saved me, but in the best of ways. I mean, it's made me who I am, and it's helped me take control and do what I love to do, and share that.
Well, it's beyond awful to hear what you went through, especially while working. It sounds trite to say especially, but especially while working on a show on this subject. But it is true that you take the audience on a journey. There's one for our viewers who won't have seen the whole show, but I hope that you all do go and see the show and watch the whole thing. But there's one bit in about halfway through where all of this darkness that has been hinted at, everything flips and everything actually becomes dark, and it's like you see the worst of everything, but from that point you do feel that there's a journey back. Once you've faced it, there's a journey back towards light. This is fascinating. Yael, it's again an important piece of work. I hope you'll stay with us from Bilbao.
Thank you so much, James. Of course I will.
Thank
you for this conference.
Well, thank you, and I hope we'll come back at the end with some questions which you can join in with. There's so much more to say about all of these shows, but we will move on. The next play that we're going to talk about is another instance of theatre, as are these all, of theatre dealing with issues of disability, quite literally in this case, but dealing with it in a very different kind of tone. This play is called Without the Evil Eye by Sarel Peterman and Asaf Ben Shimon, and we will show you a clip from that now.
פחד שאני אפול, שאני אפיל, שאני אשבור, שאני אהרוס את זה. מרוב הלחץ מהפגישה, יצאתי מהבית 2 שעות לפני הזמן. בול כמו היום. את הדרך לתחנת האוטובוס אני הכרתי בעל פה. ואני ככה הולך ברחוב, מתמלא ביטחון, העולם יפה, הציפורים מצייצות, פתאום משום מקום אני מרגיש איזה כתף של ג'ודוקה נכנסה בי.
אתה לא רואה לאיפה אתה הולך?
רציתי להגיד לו שלא, שאני לא רואה לאיפה אני הולך, אבל אמרתי לו, סליחה אחי, סליחה. אני אומר סליחה איזה 15 פעם ביום. פעם אמרתי סליחה לתמרור אין כניסה, הוא לא ענה לי. ואני ממשיך לכיוון התחנה. ריח שנקניק, עברתי את המכולת של ישקה, ככה מתגייס, מחדש לקראת הדייט, פתאום אני שומע את הדלתות של האוטובוס נפתחות, רגע נהג אל תיסע, רגע, ואני רץ, ואני לא רואה כלום בחושך, הוא מתפלל לא להיכנס בעמוד חשמל או בקיר של התחנה, רגע נהג, למה אתה עושה דווקא? וואי, הספקתי את האוטובוס. נהג, תוכל להגיד לי בבקשה שנגיע לתחנה של רוטשילד, איפה שהמסעדות והברים?
רוטשילד?
כן.
אתה על הקו הלא נכון, חביבי.
מה?
אתה על 72, לחולון.
ירדתי תחנה אחרי. אין לי מושג איפה אני רק שומע רעש של נגריה וריח של סנדוויץ' טוניסאי. לא מכיר אף רחוב עם ריח של סנדוויץ' טוניסאי. סליחה גברת, איך אני מגיע מכאן לרוטשילד, איפה שהמסעדות והברים?
אתה רואה את הכיכר בסוף הרחוב?
אם אני רואה? כן.
אז אתה ממשיך עד הכיכר, בכיכר אתה תראה פנייה שמאלה, אתה תראה שם קופת חולים, ואז שים לב שלא תפספס, צמוד יש פנייה לגפן, אתה תראה כבר.
עצרתי כל דקה מישהו לוודא שאני בכיוון. הגעתי באיזה רבע שעה איחור, ואני אף פעם לא מאחר, חוץ מאז והיום. ואני ככה מחפש אותה באור המעומעם של המסעדה, ושומע אסף, הוא מסתכל לכיוון הכל ורואה שם ערימה של טלטלים, ככה מנופפת לי לשלום. כולך יפה רעייתי, ומום אין בך. כל כך לא רציתי שהיא תדע על המום שלי, אבל איך אני מגיע אליה? היא כל כך רחוקה, ובדרך הכל צפוף. שולחנות, כיסאות, מצרים עם מגשים וכוסות. מסעדות זה כמו נינג'ה ישראל של עיוורים. מה עשיתי? נכנסתי למסעדה. שלפתי את הנייד מהכיס, כאילו אני קורא הודעה. זה מסביר למה אני הולך לאט ונתקל בדברים, כי אני שקוע בטלפון. ואני ככה לאט לאט, בצעדים זהירים, מתקרב אליה, ממשש את הרצפה עם הרגל כמו מקל נחייה. נתקל בשולחן, הופה, מתקן. עוקף משענת של כיסא. מה זה פה, אזור צפוף? וואה, אלנה, לאט. סליחה גברתי, אדוני, סליחה אדוני. יש לכם פה מזלג על הרצפה שתדעו. סליחה רבותיי, רגע, אני עובר לצד השני. מדרגה קטנה, קפיצונת. מלצר עובר, הופה. אני עוצר. מיקה, אני בדרך אלייך.
That's some of Without the Evil Eye by Sarel Peterman and Asaf Ben Shimon. It's tackling a difficult subject again, but in I think it's fair to say in an upbeat and very enjoyable way. But one senses it took some courage to get there. What's interesting, particularly here, if you don't know the story behind it, is the actor there, Asaf Ben Shimon, actually is telling the story of his blindness, and he himself is blind. And if you come to this blind, as it were, as I did, and you don't know that story, it comes as quite a shock. He stops at one point and he says, "This, I know you think actors make everything up, but this is true. I am blind." What we're seeing is he comes for an audition for Hamlet, and he seems a bit, it starts a bit like a play that is itself a bit clumsy. He's a bit clumsy, he's banged into the wall, and then about 10 minutes in you realize why, and you understand the true nature of the play. I'm joined now by Howard Ripp here who runs Nefesh Theatre, the company which presents this wonderful play. Howard, very delighted to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. I just want to say that I'm sorry that Asaf couldn't be here. Asaf is observant, and the Shabbat has arrived, the Sabbath, so he's unfortunately able to be here, and I'll hopefully speak for him.
Right, here in Jaffa, where we are, it is now Friday night, and so we're all being bad Jews, but not Asaf. So, Howard, tell me, when did your involvement with the play begin? Had the play had a life before it came to
No,
you?
it actually didn't. I actually know the playwright that co-wrote with Asaf, Sarel Peterman. He acted in a previous play of ours that we did, a Yeshua Sobel play that we took to Poland and around the world. And we were always looking for something to work together with. And when Sarel came with this idea of doing a play based on Asaf's life and true story and his ascent into blindness and how he dealt with it, I said, let's do it. And it came right at the time when we were in the midst of the pandemic. And both of them are very hardworking and had a lot of work. And this was like a time when they were able to just find some time to write it and work on it. And it came out. And now everyone's just fighting for dates to book the play. It's just a crowd pleaser. And I think the only criticism we have of the play is Asaf is just an amazing actor. And like you said, you really don't know that he's blind or that he can't see so well.
Yeah, I even Googled it. Even after he says it in the play, I thought, that can't be right, because it's really fascinating, actually. He says, doesn't he, about the characteristics of people who are blind, you can often, the eyes sort of stop bothering to assume an expression, so he worked on that.
Oh, he works.
You never guess.
You always feel like he's talking to you, he's looking at you. You really know that you think that, you just forget that he's blind completely. It's amazing.
It's interesting that you used the phrase, you said, ascent into blindness. And I suspect you didn't use it deliberately, but I think it's accurate, because there is the sense in the play, don't you think, that he becomes something more through learning to tackle this?
Yeah, I mean, why I said ascent is he really, it was a slow understanding of what was happening to him. It wasn't something all of a sudden he's, doesn't see anymore. He slowly lost his sight, and he had to deal with it. And he dealt with it. For me, it's very inspiring. And I know the play stays for days with people. People come afterwards and tell me, I've been thinking about this for days, because everyone has disabilities and incapabilities, and have to find ways to deal with them. And he managed to do that in a big way, and he's a real source of inspiration for me now. And I feel it's just a blessing for me to have this play and to be working with the two of them. They're both so talented.
What was it like in the rehearsal process? I mean, I'm sure that Asaf himself has clearly developed his ways of working. Although at one point during the play, of course, he gets off the bus, he gets on the wrong bus, he gets off at the wrong place, and he talks about the smells he doesn't recognize, as seeing people would talk about the sights they don't recognize.
Well, his senses are so much more acute. I mean, one thing I really see is, hear, is how much he knows who's around him by his sense of hearing. From 20 meters away, he knows I'm around. And, he knows everyone, he remembers their name. Even not seeing them, he remembers everyone. He's got an amazing memory. He calls himself Asaf Weighs Ben Shimon, because everywhere he goes, he has to count his steps, and he has to know how to get to a certain place by knowing how many steps he's making. And that's also, I think, with the process in the rehearsal. First of all, his script, a normal script was about 15, 20 pages. His was like 90 pages, so he could, be able to try to see with it. But
you mean large print?
Very large print, yeah, that he had. And he had to learn everything in terms of his movement, so he knows where he would be all the time. And not only this for this play, Asaf is a very versatile actor. He's done a lot of movies, and he's able to function like anybody, even though he's got that disability.
Very interesting. The play, of course, has the word "I" in the title. Oh no, we should explain for those who don't know. The set is the Hamza. It's to ward off. In Jewish and other traditions, it's to ward off the evil eye. Although he starts the play, I was going to say, in complete. Well, we all start the play in complete darkness with the lights off, as we hear him stumbling through the corridor.
That's right.
And ironically, of course, in that situation, he is the one who would be the most orientated of all of us, because he's the one who's used to it.
Yeah.
But I'm quite fascinated by this idea of the eye and perspectives, and I wondered if this was something that came out that was discussed or explored during the rehearsal process, the sense of seeing things from different perspectives when in fact you can't see. So what does the word "see" even mean, and how is he seen? Was this something that
I think a couple of things they explored a lot in the play. First of all, the Hamsa is a Moroccan, it's just a Jewish kind of superstitious thing without the evil eye, that it's always said, I hope this will work out without the evil eye. It's kind of like making sure this won't happen. And I think Sorel consciously tried to show the hand in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different times you can see the hand, not only
Based
on
on
the
his
stage,
jeans, isn't
on
it,
the
when he-
jeans when he,
the paint print.
and I think it's kind of, it really symbolizes what Asaf is trying to do, is he's reaching out. His hand is reaching out, and he's just looking for the good, looking for, and giving hope. And this is, I think, a big image in the play, is that hand, that it's all open and available and willing to be for people, and he really encourages that for everybody to
Wow.
reach out.
What a wonderful, uplifting message, and so fascinating. And actually, nothing to do with the play really, but you put me in mind when I first met my wife, who's Israeli, and she came to live with me in England. She made from papier-mâché one of those Hamza hands, and I was never quite sure whether it was to ward me off or whether it was for something else, but you're giving me a good sense of it.
It's to ward evil spirits off and to bring in good spirits. I must say that I know this whole evening is for a lot to do with loss, and I personally also just had a real loss, that all my set and costumes were burnt not very long ago. And I always was, at the first I thought, oh, what am I going to do? How can this be for the good? There's an expression in Hebrew, everything's for the best. And I didn't understand that for the first few days. But, one of the things that helped me is also inspired by Asaf, is this feeling of really just trying to reach out and make the best. And I felt this from people all around me, I feel a sense of community. Everyone's reaching out and trying to help me and trying to show their appreciation, their love. It's like being hugged by a big community. And the play really gave me that inspiration as well. It's something that's I know everybody here is talking about how they deal with their loss or how they deal with their incapabilities. And I feel this play, like I said at the beginning, it's kind of a blessing. And for me, it's been a blessing because it's really inspired me to just see around me all the good. Asaf says, look for the good. When he was really down and he was really feeling like he's blind, there's nothing to do, he says, look for the good, search for it, find it, and when you find it, hug it, hold on to it, don't let it go. And this is something that that really inspired me, because I really feel it now. All the good around me is happening.
That's wonderful.
So,
well,
yeah.
may that long continue.
Yes.
And it occurs to me that what we haven't really touched on very much yet in this whole session is the role of theatre when it's tackling disability. We're looking at it from various angles, but what you say makes me think about the whole process, the whole exchange that happens between performers on stage and between an audience. And when you're on stage, especially in a big theatre perhaps, and you have the lights on you, you can't see the audience. And a lot of actors will talk about a kind of shimmering, you feel this kind of shimmering energy of the audience, and you try and match it with your own energy. And this all sounds terribly New Age, but it's an actual thing.
Absolutely.
And in a way, it feels like a hand reaching out from behind the lip of the stage, and a hand reaching out from the audience, and somehow it's not with your physical hands, but somehow you touch, and the performer gives a hand, and the audience gives a hand, and then of course at the end, give me your hands if we be friends. You literally give a hand, you give a round of applause.
I think even though Asaf doesn't see, he can feel the audience. For instance, during the Corona, still we had to do some shows outside, and it was much harder for him because the audience was much further away. He was doing some shows in prisons where prisoners were very, very close to him, and he felt them, and they felt him very, and that whole feeling again, it was really, there's a word in Hebrew, tikkun olam, to repair the world. And this is, I think, what Asaf was doing in the prisons, was really showing them that there's still hope, even at they're at the bottom of everything. All these prisoners really got a lot of hope from him and the decisions he made and how he dealt with his own blindness. And it gave them a lot of inspiration as well. And so.
How fascinating.
Yeah.
Because, I suppose being in prison, being incarcerated, it's another kind. You may be there for a reason, but, one hopes everyone who's there is there for a reason, but nevertheless, it's another kind of disability, the ability to walk free. It's taken away from you.
And they're all trying to rehabilitate themselves to, find a way back to better themselves and be deserving in society. And I think this, again, is something when you're able to look for the good and try to find that. And that's one of the themes of the play that's really rings true.
Because
to me.
because he refuses to let people know he's blind, but you don't feel it's because he's ashamed of it. It's because he wants to, again, the word assent, he wants to become something
Exactly. He doesn't
more.
want to be felt sorry for. He wants to be a part of and not have any of that. He purposely doesn't wear glasses. He doesn't wear sunglasses. He doesn't go with a cane. He really wants to be with everybody.
I want to ask one last question. I gave in a show-offy way, I gave a half Shakespeare quote a second ago.
Yeah.
But it was deliberate because because I had this question in mind. The whole framing of this is an audition for Hamlet, and he starts off doing Hamlet, and I wondered what that's clearly a deliberate decision, but I wondered what that classical setting kind of gave you as a starting point. You have a story, well, here about a man, Hamlet, who's always trying to decide who he wants to be.
Exactly.
But in any case, you have this very presentational thing, which is a Shakespeare play. They use different language to what we use here, especially in Israel, where you speak Hebrew. Some of us do. My Hebrew is terrible. This is all being in English anyway. But you're using. So you're kind of twice removed by the Shakespearean language, by the translation of the Shakespearean language, and in any case, it's this presentational, classical setting. Did that give you anything in the creation of the play? Was it something?
Well, I think first of all, everybody knows the to be or not to be, and what you're supposed to do. Whether you're But basically, I think it really rings true at the end when he does the whole monologue. Not to do a spoiler, but at the beginning he forgets the lines and he tries to remember in Moroccan how to do it, and he can't remember. And but in the end, he realizes every day he has to make that choice to be or not to be, and he's made the choice. He's made the choice to be, to do, to go ahead, to be active. And the words of Shakespeare, I mean, he's always universal and always timely and timeless, but especially in this instance, we all, I think the words really ring true at the end when he actually does the monologue, and we really feel he knows what the monologue is about, and he won't forget it. It's an everyday thing.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, we could carry on for a long time. Now I'm thinking about blindness in King Lear and all that, but we won't do that now.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We're going to, Howard's going to stay with us very kindly, and we'll come back to some general questions at the end. And I also want to say that if you, our viewers, have questions or even comments you want to make that you think may be apt, please do write them in the chat. I think some of you have been doing so already. And at the end, we'll see, hopefully we'll have some time to come to some of those questions. We're going to move now to a play that has some similarities in terms of subject matter. It's a very different piece, but is also, in its way, extremely entertaining, extremely moving. It's called That's Not How You Walk on Stage by Mayan Kilchevsky, who is also the star of it. Mayan is with us and is going to join us in a moment, but let's watch a minute of the play.
גיל 17, תיכון. מעיפים אותי ממגמת התיאטרון. רכז המגמה לא היה מרוצה מאיך שאני הולכת על במה, זימן אותי לשיחה ושאל, אוקיי, אז למה באת למגמת התיאטרון? זאת הייתה הפעם הראשונה שהוא דיבר איתי. 1.5 שנה הוא מתעלם ממני. אני חולמת להיות שחקנית. אני חושבת שאני יכולה להיות טובה בזה. אוקיי. אני חלמתי להיות ביאליק. לא יצא. לא נורא. לא הבנתי. אתה מעיף אותי?
That's an excerpt from That's Not How You Walk on Stage by and starring Mayan Kilcheski. Mayan is with us here. I guess turn the other way now. You've got a whole section in this play about which side is your good side.
Yeah.
So
Left side, definitely.
the left side. Okay, well then I'm out of luck if it's also true for me. This is a fascinating story. Why don't you tell a little bit of the story and tell me how you came to tackle it as a theatre piece?
So I was born as a 1/3 of a triplet, and I was born with cerebral palsy, which is in short CP, which is CP. It's like a group of disorders in the brain which affects the motor way of the motor ability of the body to move, and my CP is mild, and it affects only my lower part of the body. My legs go inwards, my balance is shaky, and I actually cannot walk spontaneously. I need to think about walking while I'm walking. So if I would not think about walking, my legs can be like confused and I will fall. So yeah, this is the CP I was born with. And the show actually reveals instances from my life where I had to cope with CP, with my body, with a hostile environment, with romantic relationships in my life, and especially with the dream to walk the way I know how to, and to be an actress and perform, and to be on stage limping as much as I want, and to be accepted.
Well, it's a fascinating piece of work, and one of the fascinating things about it is you have flashes of, one could imagine you could be very angry with some of the things you describe, the segment we just saw with the guy kicking you out of the drama course. And you have flashes of anger in it. There are one or two flashes of anger. But generally, it's a more kind of playful, well, I would say practical and sometimes becoming playful sort of approach to things. The play is all set when you're younger, when you're a child. And you have a childlike kind of quality in it. I'm curious to know whether that childlike quality kind of liberated you in the way that you explored your story. And when I say liberated you, I mean, did it make you feel freer to feel the emotions more extremely, or just play around with it creatively?
So to be honest with you, when I was a child, I was an expert in hiding myself. So I think when I'm on stage now, I'm not only the child I was, but I'm actually celebrating I'm celebrating my own self with my disability, and I'm standing proud and saying, I'm an actress, I'm 34 years old, I have CP, and I can't walk the same way you all walk. And this, I think, the hint of childish energy you feel, because I actually celebrate myself, I think, for the first time in my life through this
It's
show.
like being able to be the childlike thing we're talking about. It's being able to be gleeful and totally gleeful in a moment. I mean, when you have young children, you see that they just can completely give themselves to the emotion of the moment. If they're happy, they can be completely happy. The next moment, they might fall and be completely sad. And you smile it's a very charming show, and you smile your way through it. And there is the sense, well, this is the impression I got, but there is the sense that you're completely gleeful at points in the fact that you've been able to express who you are despite these things. And do you feel, I'm interested, do you feel now that times have moved on, that society, because we talk a lot about inclusiveness in society and people being proud of who and what they are, whatever their differences are. Everyone doesn't have to be the same. I'm never sure how much it's actually true, but so I'm interested to know whether you feel that things have changed. And so this piece of theatre is something that is almost a piece of victory for you, that a lot of these problems are in the past tense and less now. Or is that not true?
Yes, and it's accurate. I want to believe that things are changing, and we are all as a society can look at each other's eyes with our all differences and hug them. And I want to say that I was hiding for so long, and I thought I'm the only one in the world who is disabled. I'm the only one in the world with no friends. I'm the only one in the world that is told not to be an actress just because the way she walks. But I realize when I meet the audience that eventually we are all disabled. We are all ugly in some ways. And when you understand that, so I realized that my story is about CP, but it's the story of us all, accepting first of all who we are, loving ourselves, and then make others the privilege to see our light and shine with all our parts, the beautiful of them and the less.
It's quite, here's an interesting question, I hope. It's quite a brave show because you and I were discussing earlier, and one of the things you said is you're almost naked on stage, but you're wearing very little. What you are wearing is kind of flesh-colored, but you also open yourself up in all kinds of ways. I mean, both physically, there's a bit where you're kind of balancing on a beam or a bench, and you get the sense maybe you could fall. There's another bit you talk very, I think it's an act of bravery. You talk about having sex and the challenges and how you and your partner, can respond to the physical, characteristics and so on. And yet, it keeps coming back. Well, the way I perceive it, it keeps coming back to you smiling in the show and this sense of victory. But here's the question: when you do have a disability and you are opening yourself up like that, and I think that opening yourself up on stage, which is something that is clearly brave, you have a theatre full of people, all of these faces, but it's also a metaphor for the way you open yourself up in life, because your stage is much bigger in life. It's wherever you walk is your stage, and you're facing all the people in the high street, all the people in the school, all the people in your clubs, whatever it is. And I wonder, what is the line that you discovered in making this play between bravery and bluster, between genuinely having that, I don't care, I have the courage to do this, and this is how I'm going to discover myself and discover who I am and be myself, and, whistling a happy tune so you don't feel afraid anymore. The sense that there is fear there is bitterness there and anger there, but I'm refusing it. I'm smiling and I'm putting it over here. Was that something that you felt you were exploring in this play, or looking back that you think is something that you came across in the play?
So my parents didn't talk with me about CP at all at home. And it's an interesting subject to put the light in, because I actually didn't walk in this world as a disabled. I walked as a person who can do anything, and my parents raised me with the idea that I can do anything and accomplish anything. But then life happened, and I met with a society that didn't accept me. And I think the first time I had the courage to speak out was when I was in 7th grade on stage playing Rosaline, the princess from As You Like It. And I was like actually hiding behind this character I was playing, and I could be myself and I could be exposed, but I had this character shelter. And I think the more I was on stage, the more I played different characters that weren't my aunt the disabled, weren't my aunt the limping child, wasn't my aunt with the CP. I got more secure with myself, and this confidence just went through the stage of life, but it took years.
You say in the play, at the very first moment of that, the boy who would call you names, he couldn't call you names, it wasn't in the script.
Exactly.
He had to call you the princess.
Yeah, exactly. So kids that didn't speak with me at lunch break all of a sudden had to be on stage with me and play with me and be in love with me and smile to me. And the stage definitely, and theater almost, changed my life completely, because I went from being a silent child to speak out loud. And I think this show, That's Not How You Walk on Stage, is like the climax of my exposure as a person who does not hide anymore with his disability.
It's really interesting because we think of going on stage, well, those of us who make theatre maybe have another view of it, but many people think of going on stage as dressing up, as something artificial. And all right, even if we take it from the theatre professional's point of view, you know, there's the whole method acting thing, where in method acting teaches sense memory, where if you have to be sad, you think of a time in your life when you were sad, and you bring that to that moment on the stage, so that the feeling you have is truth, and you're bringing it to this artificial, made-up moment to bring truth to it. But still, the moment is artificial, and you're bringing truth from off the stage. But from what you're telling me, it sounds like it was on the stage that you got to find the real you somehow.
Absolutely. On stage, I feel the most beautiful, the most strong, the most charismatic person that I'm not always in life. The stage really protects me to be exactly who I am. And when I met the society that says you can't walk on stage this way, I was in shock. I mean, this is my home. This is where I'm most close to myself. So how come you say I cannot walk on stage or I cannot be an actress just because the way I walk?
Yeah.
And we all have people during our lives that would tell us, you can't do that and you can't do that. You better not do that. It's not good for you. But eventually, the only one who can define what we can or can't do is ourselves. And I'm not saying everything you want, you will accomplish. I'm not saying that. I'm saying everything you want, you need to proceed and run for it and catch it and do everything you can to accomplish it. And this is what I want people to come out from the show with, to be exposed, to be loved with themselves, to show out all the ugliest part in us, and to not be ashamed, and to not hide, and to run towards your dreams, even if all the other things it's impossible.
And I imagine you've had a fair number of those reactions after the show as well. Have you also had people come up to you who themselves are suffering from disabilities and say that
yeah,
it's
so actually
empowered them?
I meet a lot of people with CP all of a sudden. I have like a little community. And
Who knew?
It's a lot of different levels of severeness with CP. So some cannot even speak. And some that watched the show came up to me and said, thank you for speaking for us. Because I have really mild CP that affects the way I walk, but I have את היכולת.
The ability.
Yeah, I have the ability, disability, whew. So I have the ability to speak out loud. And that's why I am, for the first time, not Rosaline the princess. I'm Mayan the disabled, speaking for others. And actually, I have so many people coming after shows, and each show I do, I realize that it's not only my own personal story, it's the story of us all, because we all hide something, and we all escape from something, and we all think we are not as perfect as we wanted to be. So it's very warm-hearted to feel that my own little story can touch so many others.
Gosh, and what a fascinating image. We talked before about Shakespeare, we talked before about an ascent with disability, and this image of you were Rosaline the princess up here, and you were Mayan here, and now you're Mayan here. And Mayan and the princess are on the same level, which is true in a piece of theatre. It's a one-person show. You're the star of it. You shine very brightly, and one night Rosaline, one night Mayan, and they're the same.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's fascinating, and you're going to stick around, thank you, for some more questions in a moment. The next show, I'm not really sure how to describe this one. It is about disability. It's not about a disability I faced, I'm happy to say, and I'm not sure it's a disability any of us have faced. But we take it as, metaphorically, we could all face this. It's a show called Ringo from the Camry Theatre of Tel Aviv by Yaron Edelstein. It's about a guy whose penis falls off, which hasn't happened to me yet today, as I say, but it may. It's a wonderful song and dance show. It's a very funny musical. It's a satire. And maybe coming your way. Here's a clip.
אני אוהבת אותך.
אז כן?
דני, אני מאוהבת בך.
כלומר, כן.
ברור.
ברור שכן,
כן,
נכון?
כן, כן. מה חסר לנו בדרך לחיים מאושרים? טוב, בוא נעלה את הממוצע שלנו ל-1.9.
רגע, אולי עדיף פיפי קודם? אני קראתי שזה יותר בריא ל...
מונית, אמרת.
כן, אני כבר חוזר.
ולמה דני צעק עכשיו מתוך השירותים? דני? דני?
כי הוא גילה דבר נורא שמיד בולט לעין, הוא גילה שאין לו זין.
דני, הכל בסדר?
כן, כן, נפל פה משהו.
אוקיי. וזה לא דימוי כפי שמקובל בשירים, לא מטאפורה שחוקה לעליונות של גברים, וגם לא משל על חרדה או על רגשות אשם, נעלם לו הזין.
באמת הוא לא שם.
Ringo by Yaron Edelstein. Well, I think you got the premise there. The disaffected member, let's say, then goes off and has his own life, takes the protagonist's girl, has a almost has a political career at one point, and it's really a comedy of manners and genitalia, if I may describe it that way. Yaron is with us via link. He's in India at the moment. Hi, Yaron.
Hi.
Lovely to have you with us. So tell me, I should say Yaron and I had a lovely conversation earlier this week where he told me the whole plot blow by blow, which itself was a wonderful piece of performance. Tell me how you came up with such an idea.
You hear me okay? Because I'm hearing myself a little bit in delay and it's okay?
We hear you.
Okay. So again, the question how this idea came up?
Yep.
Well, actually, the first draft of this play of Ringo, it was written like 10 years ago. And as far as I can remember, I think at that point, I had this image in my head that a man that is in a chase after his libido, in all kind of manners. Maybe I even felt about myself, especially at that point of my life, that I'm like, I got all these passions to do a lot of things, to career and to recognition and a lot of things that another part of me is not sure it's so healthy for him, and he enjoy it actually, and he's like in a chase, exhausting chase after him. And I think that was some image that start this thing off. Of course, there's influence from Gogol's Nose or Hanoch Levin, Hirschfischer, this image of a man that his penis is on his own is I read it and I saw it in creations, and it felt like a very strong image that I can, through him, work out all kind of things that interest me, or in the personal way and also in a political way in Israel. For example, some question that I dealt with in the writing process is, if in Israel we choose leaders that are more talking to our passions and emotions, or to our logic side. All the plays on this tension, dramatic tension between the mind and the logic
Because we should,
part of us.
Excuse me interrupting, we should say that Danny, the protagonist, the man who loses his equipment, is a very logical, kind of cool-minded guy, or at least he starts that way. And when the pianist goes off and becomes Ringo, is his name, becomes a character in his own right, he's completely the opposite, correct?
Yeah. I think in this manner, it's also maybe the link to disabilities in the play. Like this, both sides, they're both disabled. You know, Danny, the protagonist, is detached from his passions and libido, and Ringo, the other side, is he's doing the opposite process in the play, that to be not detached to his mind, to his heart, etc. This is in a very wide manner. But what I was saying about the political side in the third act, especially, is that if there's a character of a prime minister who became very dominant in the last act, and at the end, it's quite a spoiler, but we find out that he's also a penis, and that all Western male leaders are penises, that this is the ultimate fulfillment of a penis, to be a leader, to conquer a country. And so the question, if in Israel the leaders are more penises, as the metaphor, that the talking to our passions world and images, or to something different, to logic, or to something less less passionate in the society.
And this is something, we discussed this the other day, and I thought it was such a fascinating idea, that we've talked about classical theatre finding its way into these pieces. This kind of satire and the use of what we could call vulgar images is very grounded in classical theatre. I mean, in ancient Greek theatre, Aristophanes and so on. There's a lot of satire around. In Lysistrata, for example, the women withhold sex until the men will, till their libido will either calm down or force them to be more cool-headed. And I was trying, on the phone to you the other day, I said this story, and I was trying to remember exactly the details, but basically the details, something like Laurence Olivier, when he was doing Oedipus Rex with Peter Brook, one of them did some research and discovered that the ancient Greeks at the end of a tragedy, they would show some very vulgar image so that people shouldn't get too overwhelmed by the tragedy, and they should have, I think more that they should have both sides of things, the comedy and the tragedy masks. And so at the end of this production of Oedipus Rex, the lights went off for a second and then went on again, and there was a structure under a cloth, an enormous structure, and they whipped off the cloth, and it was a giant golden penis, which was quite a controversy at the time, but they insisted I think Olivier had a fight with the board and the National Theatre over it or something. But they insisted this was very, very rooted in classical theatre. So your use of these images actually has something of a serious intent behind it.
Yes, first of all, you're right. Every time I read Aristophanes, I'm amazed because it again and again sounds very, serious. This classic comedian Aristophanes, and then when you read it or see it, it's so vulgar, and the language is so rough, and it's got a purpose. It's some rough theater. As you say, Peter Brook, I remember in his book, in the Empty Space, he talks about it, that it's not, that it shakes us. I think that the theater itself is trying to link us, to attach us to also this side, the id, by Freud, that it's not a superego, it's not the thing the society wants from us. There's something wild and free inside of us, and there's this tension all the time between these two forces in the personal level, in the society level, in the political level, and I think the play is like a little bit juggling with all these aspects.
But what I find very interesting as well is that when it comes to ancient texts, we venerate, we worship, and study expressions of comic vulgarity and sexuality and sex in comedy, and the sex farce. I mean, there's also not a play, but Chaucer, the Canterbury Tales, of which there have been many plays and films, of course, is full of the most. You couldn't put that stuff on today in The Miller's Tale, famously. I'm not going to go into it here, but if anyone doesn't know it, trust me, it's pretty graphic. Shakespeare, of course, if you actually understand the comedy in some of Shakespeare, it's really, it's really no holds barred. And then I think when we got to the kind of 20s, 30s, 40s, Noel Coward, that kind of thing, I think a sort of, there was Joe Orton, but some sort of Puritan sense kind of settled over theatre for a while, and we didn't venerate, there was the sex farce, but we didn't respect it quite as much. And it seems to me that this kind of tradition actually has a lot to it, and a lot that we can study, and it can hold up a mirror to society, as you say.
Yes, I think it's not this play, from one side, it's quite a light comedy. It's fun, it's a musical, it's very colorful. The director, Amit Apte, directed it with a lot of, it's a very fast and furious, and it's and the audience laugh and enjoy, and it's not takes itself very, very seriously. On the other hand, it's still because of this central metaphor, and I think someone counted, and 88 times in the play they say the word dick, literally as it is. So it's all the time it put the audience, especially in a repertoire theater, in the Kameri, in some kind of surprising state of mind. I can feel, I can see the audience is enjoy this something that it's not with theater with ties and the actors bring beers to the audience, and the main place on the stage is a bar, the Banana Pub, and I even noticed that journalists that wrote about the show suddenly enjoyed to play with the word, actually the word, dik, zayin in Hebrew. All the titles of critics that usually will never use this language suddenly started to find all kind of jokes about how to use it, and it's like in this way it's interesting what
Well,
it's
it's
making
kind of, but it is. Maybe I'm taking this the wrong way, and it's my shaky Hebrew. But like you said, the word for it is very much like the word for a letter of the alphabet. So it's in Hebrew. So it's as natural as speaking the alphabet, and it's something that is as natural. And if you're without it, you have a disability. It's not the complete alphabet. I'm at the danger of pushing this too far, but given the context of this discussion, we've been talking about. We've been touching on ideas of becoming a complete person, ascending to becoming a complete person, even more than you were before in learning to be amongst society, learning to live with your disability, learning to be proud of the way you are. And in this very enjoyable musical, you have the two characters of Danny and Ringo, and neither of them is complete at the beginning when they're not attached to each other, even when they are, actually. But when they're not attached to each other, as you said, one is kind of all head, one is all sort of libido. But then gradually they take on characteristics of each other and meet somewhere in the middle. And so there is the sense there also of finding a way to be complete and perhaps more than most people in society.
Yeah, I agree. Well, yeah, this is the process that each of these two protagonists is making through the play, and at the end of the play, it's when they together again. There's one monologue of Danny. He's he got a big speech in Kikar Rabin Square after Ringo, his penis is been kidnapped by Hamas after he's go to the army because he wants as a part of his freedom. There's all kind of twists in the plot, and there's a big speech of him. And in this speech, for the first time, Danny is spontaneous, and he's not talking from his head and from the paper that he prepared ahead. The first thing he said is, remember that when we were kids, and we made how do you say, תחרות,
competition.
Yeah, with my dad and my bigger brother, who is peeing more far, and we won, and we've been together. So it's take you to this place as a child, maybe like Maayan a little bit said that in the beginning you feel complete, and when you are a child, and the society and all kind of inner processes that you are going through in all this system of schools and army and all things that detect you from parts in you, and maybe the memory of the state of mind as children is some key to make this combination again.
Well, I'll just finish this very interesting discussion by observing that, not being immensely religious myself, but in Judaism, music is one of the, this being a musical, music is one of the things that has a very special place allotted to it, a very special quality, because music can reach deeper than just words, and it can reach into our emotions, but it can also marry together feelings and thoughts. So it's very appropriate that this is a musical. Thank you very much, Yaron. Please stick around because we're going to have time to just for a few general thoughts for all of us shortly. And before the session finishes, maybe we'll have time to show one more very amusing excerpt from Ringo. I'm going to turn now, though, if I may, to a play called Behind the Eyes by Nava Semel, by the late Nava Semel. This is an interesting example because it's a classic Israeli play. It's been around for a long time. It's been performed all around the world. And it was written by the wonderful writer Nava Semel. And it's about a child, well, it's about a mother who has a child with Down syndrome. The reason we're looking at it today is because and we're only going to look at it briefly because unfortunately the person who is going to come and speak to us about it is ill. So I'm going to give a little 30-second commentary. However, there's a new production from the Haifa Municipal Theatre. And what's fascinating here is it was originally a monodrama, and this production fragments the monodrama. So you have 3 actresses alternately playing the mother, the child, any other characters who are talked about. So please enjoy a trailer for this.
שלושה ימים אחרי הלידה והמחשבה הזאת עדיין ממשיכה לענות אותי.
הילד סובל מתסמונת דאון. אל תיקחי אותו הביתה, שלא תקשרי. זה הבן שלנו. איך תסתכלי עליו לפחות?
לא קניתי מתנה. פשוט לא ידעתי מה תינוק כזה צריך. קחי.
בואו תראו מה ציירתי!
את שולחת את הילד הזה לכיתה א'?
כן, גברת באום. אני שולחת את הילד הזה. אגב, קוראים לה יותם. יש לו שם. מפתיע, נכון?
מתי נכנסת לו הנשמה ואני לא הרגשתי דבר. למה אני לא הולך לבית ספר של טליה?
בגלל שאתה לא כמו כל הילדים.
מתי נכנסת לו הנשמה ואני לא הרגשתי דבר.
The Child Behind the Eyes by Nava Semel, production by Moore Frunk at the Haifa Municipal Theatre. As I said before, the monodrama has been fragmented into being cast with 3 actresses, but also times 2 because there is a simultaneous production with 3 in Arabic with 3 Arab actresses. Which brings me on to the general questions part of our session here, with which we're going to almost close things up. Israel is a very special place. Those of you who've been here can't help but have noticed that. Those of you who haven't been here, I really hope, I know we all hope we will welcome you here sometime in the coming years when Corona allows, which will be next year, will be next year. And Israel has many qualities. It's a deeply multicultural society. It's a tiny place. I mean, for those of you who don't know, it's the size of Wales, the size of New Jersey. And yet it has multiplicities of everything. It has something like 4 climates across this tiny country. It has many peoples. It's the center, as you know, of many religions. We have many peoples indigenous here. We have Jews, we have Muslims, we have Baha'i, Christians, etc., etc., Druze. So I'd like to ask the panel, you guys are now the panel, what has been your experience of doing this play in Israel with different kinds of audiences, whether you've noticed that different kinds of audiences and different places have shone different kinds of lights on the pieces that you've done here. Let me start with Mayan.
So it's amazing, but I found out that we all so different, but we all so similar. We all have, as I said before, we all have a baggage that we carry on with us. It could be our culture, it could be our disability, it could be our profession, it could be our inconvenience with ourselves, or where we grew up, or how we grew up, or the house we grew up in. So many colors that define the differences between us, but make us so unite when you realize that we are all not perfect, and that our differences is the way for us to shine, and it's the way it's what makes us unique. And it took me a lot of time and a lot of years to realize that my difference is my unique, and my difference is my power. So I find us all different and unique and beautiful, each one in his own way. And Israel is absolutely a place where you can see so many cultures, so many colors, so many differences. But we are all kind of unite in a baggage of experiences.
And also we're all flawed physically, mentally, in terms of character, no doubt, and our flaws are what differentiate us, but also unite us in the end. Howard, in the play we've been talking about, we're talking about blindness. So this is a state where you literally cannot see differences.
Well, first of all, my theater comes from Canada originally, where it was totally multicultural, where Canada is, that's sort of what I inherited here, and here is also multicultural, and our theater does plays in Hebrew, in English, in Arabic, in Yiddish, in Amharic. But if we're talking about today and what we're doing today, I think Isaac Bashevis Singer once said that to be universal, you must be specific. And I think here, all the things we're talking about, everyone's very specific about the issues they're dealing with, but they're all very universal. They're all, I mean, with the play Without an Evil Eye, I've already seen in the short run that it's had that it's managed to get to a lot of different audiences. Like I told you, prisoners and children and adults and disabled people, all kinds of people really connect to it, and it's because of its universality. On the other hand, though, I think that you also have to reach out. Like we're planning to do the play in English in March, so it will be able to be, be accessible to people that aren't used to watching and reading subtitles, and that's kind of sometimes in America anyway. I know they're not as used to it as in Europe. So
well, no, I mean, but speaking as a Brit, this is it's a real thing here. That Israel is a society of many societies. It's an immigrant society as well, and you have at least 4 or 5 different major languages here. Most principally, of course, Hebrew and Arabic, but also English, French, Russian, and it's interesting. If we had Yael still on the line, I would ask her about. I don't think we do. Have we got Yael still on the line? No. Okay. It would be interesting because that, of course, is as much a choreographed piece as anything. Sure. Oh, we have. Is she there?
Oh, yes, she's there.
You are there. Oh, good. Excellent. So I wanted to ask, in that case, about we're talking about the different languages and different societies here in Israel. Your piece is music, which is a common language, and it's as much choreographed as anything. So I wonder whether you find that different peoples whatever their color or creed, react to it in the same ways or different ways, depending, where they come from and where you're performing it?
Both are correct. Both same and different. We've had the honor and the privilege to perform it in France, and we actually made a French version of the show, which by this time I speak, but still it's quite a leap. And the original performance is in English. It's one of the elements of distancing for me to work with, and I can say that I'm really accumulating just exceptional experiences with audiences, in Israel and in the experiences we've had abroad. I can't really put my finger, exactly. Of course, there are different ways in how people approach me or come to talk to me or write to me. But I think, yes, I'm completely with all of you for all that, we're all flawed. Many of us have been through, we've all been through some traumatic experiences, and some of us have been through especially traumatic experiences. I think also, being in a society where, there's, it's true for many places, but there's a lot of violence, and people, I have had men, for example, also that have been through, sexual assault that. I think it's always more difficult for them to come up and speak, but I do hear those voices. And also I hear voices of men who've been traumatized by other things here, by the army, that we know that's a very big issue. But, post-trauma is post-trauma. And of course, we know also today that a lot of research and a lot of ways also of helping people and things that have developed in therapy have been developed because of post-trauma from war, and that's been taken also into helping people with post-trauma from violence in general. So I think it's yes, different and the same, but I think audiences are very brave. I think audiences, of course, also theater programmers that tend to choose pieces like you've been presenting here today, that's saying a lot. And audiences that come and put themselves, in this receptiveness and openness, and that's always something I really admire.
Thank you. And I want to come back to a question about the conflicts we have here. But while we have Yaron on the line as well, I want to ask him about comedy as something that brings peoples together. Yaron, do you find that when Ringo is performed before, I don't know how much it's taught actually, but when it's performed before an audience that is largely, let's say, I don't know, an Arab audience in Nazareth or Haifa or something like that, when it's performed before a principally Jewish audience in Tel Aviv or wherever, do people laugh the same? Do people respond to different things in it? Do they educate the actors about different sides of it?
Well, actually, Ringo its premiere was only, I think, 4 months ago, and till now it was acting only in the Camera Theater in Tel Aviv. What I can say is one thing that is interesting in talking about the audience, specific in Ringo, is the age matter of the audience. This play is a part of a wish of the Camera Theater to bring a younger audience. Today, the average age of the audience in the repertoire theater in Israel is quite high, and so I think the theme of the play is one thing, but also it is performed by a new group in the Camera it's called the Camera New Generation, that young actors, 10 young, talented, very talented actors that they are perform this, and after the show, there's like a party outside with a DJ, and it's some kind of an event that continue, and it's quite. I used to earlier plays were mostly in fringe theater, student theaters, but I know that people from the Camry or the repertoire theater, they're quite amazed that to see an audience that everybody are, on their 20s, 30s and enjoy and laugh so it's talking about audience. This is now maybe the special thing I can notice about it. I hope it will soon go to other places in the country and meet some new audiences.
And as we have as someone pointed out the other day, a new generation of leaders on all sides coming up in this society, perhaps the people as well will come up through and in theatre share things in the same way, and we won't feel our differences quite as much. I want to ask one last question, which I'm going to ask just to Mayan and Howard, because with apologies to the other two, just because they're here and we're short of time, which is, it strikes me that when we talk about disability in Israel, in general society, often we're talking about sport, and we had the Paralympics very recently, and people talk about Israel is quite proud of this, not that we have disabled athletes, of course, but because of the difficult situations, the many wars that are fought in this corner of the world, we do have a lot of disabled athletes, and therefore Israel traditionally has done very well in the Paralympics, and people talk about that aspect of things a lot. But I wonder how and if then that plays out in theatre, whether we have a particularly large segment of society, or as a general society, with everyone who knows someone who's been injured in a war here, or has been nearly injured in a war one way or another, whether you both feel, through your experiences of theatre, that there is a society here that connects directly to disability, or that there's something to be learned from an audience of Israeli theatre, or from Israeli theatre makers, because of this particular aspect of the environment that sadly, most Israelis have grown up in. Mayan, I'll start with you.
I feel that Israeli theatre is a theatre with courage that comes and says whatever it is to be said, even if it's חצוף, איך אומרים?
Chatzuf is
chutzpah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Even if it's not so delight and beautiful and optimistic, I would say, but it says something important, and that's what I think unites the Israeli theater. That when it has to say, when we have to say something, we use theater in its best way.
And partly because of the situation, we are a very direct society. That's probably part of it. Howard, if I can ask you just in 30 seconds, because we're getting towards the end of our time.
30
Sorry.
Seconds. I want to say, to go on what Mayan said, as well as I encourage, I think the country now, or the Ministry of Culture, is encouraging us. They're giving special points to employ disabled people. And that's happening. Also, the whole post-trauma thing is fairly new. Just going back to Asaf, his father, 8 years ago, put gas on himself and lit himself up and died 8 days later. He doesn't deal with that in the play, but this is something that happened when people didn't know what post-trauma was after the war. And he tried to make people clear that it happened again recently. And only recently, now, when something like that happened, is there that kind of awareness, and people are being more willing to actually deal with this. Before it was kind of a taboo and they didn't talk about it. So I think in both senses, in both cases, both in post-trauma and it's no longer taboo. We can talk about it and deal with it on the stage. And also with the disabilities, there's really an encouragement to have people that have certain disabilities, to have them perform on the stage.
Well, that's fascinating. I think partly because we're getting short of time, and partly actually because I think what we're discussing here is so important, and I think that our global society, partly also because of the whole coronavirus thing we've been going through, but in general anyway, we're grappling with so many of these issues and trying to heal ourselves as a society is not what I mean. What I mean is recognize ourselves as the society that we are and celebrate that. And I think that is something vital that theatre can do, and as you've seen, that Israeli theatre is in the forefront of. And so I'm not going to, sorry, Yaron, I'm not going to play that other Ringo excerpt, but I really suggest everyone go and watch it. It's hilarious. And all of these plays you'll find on the website. You can talk to any of the creators. Please do go and explore these fascinating, important works, wonderful works. We're so happy and grateful to have had your time. I'm so grateful to the artists who've given their time today. And I'd like to thank you very much. We will see you here in Israel. You hear me, coronavirus, in Israel in 2022. Until then, thank you very much.